All right, buckle up, everyone. We're diving deep into some serious JFK assassination research
Oh,
today.
yeah, this is gonna be good.
We're cracking open the May 1997 issue of the Fourth Decade. It's a journal, by the way, dedicated entirely to JFK assassination research.
Entirely. Wow.
Yeah, and we're talking 1997 here, over 30 years after the assassination, when a lot of folks thought the case was closed.
Yeah, you'd think so, right?
But this journal, it shows us that there was still a whole community out there passionately debating, uncovering new questions, you name it.
Always digging deeper.
Exactly. And this issue is packed. We've got articles calling for a war against the official narrative, investigations into possible links between Lee Harvey Oswald and a Tulane professor,
That's interesting.
even critiques of Case Closed, Gerald Posner's famous book.
Oh, yeah, the one that claims to have solved the whole thing.
Yep, that one. And we're going to get into all that. Plus, we're going to dig into the inconsistencies in Oswald's birth certificate.
Oh, the birth certificate. That's a whole rabbit hole in itself.
It is. It is. A seemingly small detail that's fueled countless conspiracy theories.
Yeah, how can a piece of paper cause so much trouble?
Right. But we'll get to that. First up, though, let's unpack this powerful opinion piece called In the Blossom of Our Sins, an 11th Hour Plea for War and Its Absolutions by Charles R. Drago.
War and its absolutions, huh? Sounds intense.
It is. Drago doesn't mince words. He's urging researchers to consider themselves at war with anyone upholding the official assassination narrative.
Wow, that's a strong statement.
It is. It's a call to action, a real challenge to the status quo. And get this, he believes that revealing the full truth about the assassination could actually dismantle the American government as we know it.
Whoa, 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 dismantle the government. How's that?
His argument is that the truth has been hidden, deliberately obscured to protect America's image. Revealing it, he says, would force people to question the very legitimacy of the government.
Huh. So, what's his solution then? If the truth is that dangerous, how do you even get to it?
Well, his solution is pretty radical, too. He suggests granting immunity to any surviving conspirators in exchange for the full truth. Bold, right?
Yeah, that's definitely outside the box thinking here.
Definitely. Drago's not playing around. He even compares JFK researchers to groups like AIM and the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising Fighters.
Seriously, those are some heavy comparisons.
I know, right? But he's trying to emphasize the passion, the dedication he believes is absolutely necessary in this pursuit of truth.
Yeah, I get that. It's like if you're not willing to fight for it, maybe you don't really believe in it.
And then he uses this term redoubling.
Redoubling, what's that?
It basically means using the enemy's tactics against them. In this case, he suggests confronting those who support the lone gunman theory with the truth, forcing them to choose a side.
Huh, interesting tactic. So he's saying, don't just present the evidence, make them confront it head on.
Exactly. Force them to really grapple with it. All right, let's shift gears a bit. Next up, we have In Pursuit of Leonard Reisman by Jerry D. Rose. This article dives into a possible connection between Lee Harvey Oswald and a Tulane sociology professor.
A sociology professor, that's a new one.
Right. So right after the assassination, the FBI and the Louisiana Un-American Activities Committee, the LUAC,
Oh, yeah, the LUAC.
they were trying hard to link Oswald to any left-wing groups they could find.
Trying to paint him as a communist, classic Cold War stuff.
Exactly. And that's where this Professor Reisman comes into the picture. They were digging for any connection they could find, no matter how small.
Ah, so they're trying to fit him into their narrative.
Yep. And a few key players pop up in this whole investigation. There's J.O. Vinson, an investigator who claims he found Fair Play for Cuba Committee literature near Reisman's home.
Fair play for Cuba, wasn't that Oswald's thing?
Yeah, exactly. And then we have Lieutenant Francis L. Martello, a New Orleans police officer. He claims Oswald had this nervous reaction when asked about Reisman.
A nervous reaction, huh? Could be something, could be nothing.
Right. It's also murky. And the FBI and Secret Service investigations into Reisman, they get really complicated. At one point, the FBI even asks the Secret Service to back off, to stop contacting him.
Really? That's strange. What would make them do that?
Who knows? It's like something's being hidden, right? And Reisman himself, he denied any connection to Oswald or any left-wing groups. And Jerry D. Rose, the author, he actually suggests that someone might have intentionally fabricated a connection between them.
Fabricate. Wow. So it's like they're trying to frame Reisman or maybe even Oswald.
It's possible. It looks like a deliberate attempt to manipulate information, to steer the narrative in a certain direction, to make it fit their preconceived ideas.
Yeah, almost like they had a story in mind and they were trying to make the facts fit.
Exactly. Okay, let's move on to The Rear Guards by R.F. Gallagher. This one challenges Gerald Posner's case closed, specifically focusing on how Oswald supposedly left the Texas School Book Depository.
Ah, Posner. He's the guy who claims to have definitively proven Oswald acted alone, right?
Yep, that's him. And his argument here is that Oswald left through the front door because two witnesses stationed at the back door didn't see anyone leave. Seems straightforward, right?
Yeah, on the surface at least.
But there are some problems with that. First off, those witnesses weren't even construction workers, like Posner claimed. They were laborers working a block away. They didn't even hear the gunshots.
Okay, so their vantage point wasn't exactly ideal.
Not at all. Plus, they were replaced by the FBI shortly after they arrived, which means the back door was unguarded for a period of time. Plenty of time for someone to slip out unnoticed.
Ah, so there's a gap in their surveillance.
Exactly.
Mm.
And there's more. We have contradictory evidence from other sources. For example, Forrest Sorrells, a Secret Service agent, he testified that he entered the book depository through that unguarded back door just 20 minutes after the assassination.
Mm. So someone definitely went in that way. What about coming out?
Well, James Richard Worrell Jr., he testified that he saw a man running out the back door immediately after the shots were fired. Now, the description didn't match Oswald, but it still contradicts the idea that no one left that way.
Interesting. So at least one person definitely exited through the back door. Was there anyone else?
Well, there's also Amos Ewens. He testified that he overheard another witness tell the police they'd seen a man with a bald spot running out the back.
So multiple witnesses saw someone running out the back, and none of them described Oswald.
Exactly. And the author's conclusion is that Posner was very selective in his use of witness testimony. He basically ignored any evidence that contradicted his theory.
Yeah, classic cherry picking. It happens more often than you'd think.
It does. It just goes to show you how the same facts can be interpreted in wildly different ways depending on what you're trying to prove.
It's like a Rorschach test. Everyone sees what they want to see.
Exactly. Okay, let's move on to something a little different. Flashback. A review by John Delane Williams. This one explores Ron Lewis's book Flashback, which offers a completely different take on Oswald, from someone who claims to have been his friend in New Orleans.
Oh, a friend of Oswald's. That's got to be an interesting perspective.
It is. Lewis, he had a bit of a troubled past, some run-ins with the law, but he also had connections to figures like Jack Ruby through a friend of his.
Jack Ruby, the guy who shot Oswald.
Yep, that's the one. Anyway, Lewis claims he met Oswald while they were both getting business cards printed in Fort Worth.
Business cards. What were they doing with business cards?
Well, that's part of the mystery, right? And the book, it makes some pretty bold claims. Oswald supposedly confided in Lewis about shooting at General Walker and about his involvement with Guy Bannister.
Guy Bannister. Wasn't he a former FBI agent with alleged CIA connections?
You got it. And there are even details about an arms deal involving Oswald, Ruby, and others.
Wow. An arms deal.
Yeah.
This is getting more and more intriguing.
It is. Lewis, he paints a picture of Oswald as a far more complex figure than the lone gunman narrative suggests. He portrays him as someone caught up in espionage, possibly even manipulated by powerful forces.
So not just a patsy, but an active participant, even if unwittingly.
Exactly. And there are some fascinating details in there, like Oswald's supposed plan to sell arms to the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, and then get the FBI to arrest them.
Wait, what? Why would he do that?
That's a good question. And honestly, the book doesn't really provide a clear answer. It's one of those things that just makes you scratch your head and say, what was going on here?
It's like a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit.
Exactly. Now, the reviewer, John Delane Williams, he acknowledges Lewis's writing style is a bit uneven, and he relies heavily on anecdotal evidence. But he still finds the story believable.
So take it with a grain of salt, but it's worth considering.
Right. However, there are some challenges to Lewis's claims. The biggest one being the lack of physical evidence to corroborate his relationship with Oswald. Plus, a lot of the figures mentioned in the book, they've denied Lewis's version of events.
So it's a he said, they said situation.
Pretty much. But even with those challenges, the book raises some important questions about Oswald's true nature and his activities in the months leading up to the assassination.
It definitely adds another layer of complexity to the whole story.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, last but not least, we come to Oswald's Birth Certificate by John Armstrong and Jerry D. Rose. This one dives into the mysteries and inconsistencies surrounding, you guessed it, Oswald's birth certificate.
Ah, yes, the birth certificate. A document that's caused more headaches than it should.
It really has. And the initial confusion stems from the fact that some records list Oswald's birthday as October 18th, while others say October 19th.
So which one is it?
That's part of the problem. And what's commonly referred to as his birth certificate is actually just a certification from the New Orleans Bureau of Vital Statistics, not the actual birth certificate itself.
Ah, so there's a difference. So what about the real birth certificate?
Well, that's the thing. It's never been found. The original one, signed by the attending physician or the hospital, it's just gone.
Wow. Missing. That's not suspicious at all.
Right. And instead of the real birth certificate, we have this declaration of birth document. It was signed by Oswald's uncle, Harvey F. Oswald, 7 days after the birth.
His uncle. Why not his mother?
That's the strange part. Oswald's father had died 2 months before he was born, so you'd think his mother, Marguerite, would have signed it. But she didn't.
That's odd. Makes you wonder why.
It does. And then there's the FBI's interest in Oswald's birth certificate. Back in 1960, J. Edgar Hoover himself, he expressed concerns about the possibility of an imposter using Oswald's birth certificate.
An imposter? Like someone pretending to be Oswald?
That's what Hoover was worried about. And then, just a month before the assassination, the FBI contacted the Bureau of Vital Statistics in New Orleans to reconfirm the details of Oswald's birth.
So they were digging into it again right before Kennedy was shot.
Yep. It's like they knew something was up, or at least suspected something.
Makes you wonder what they knew that we don't.
It really does. I mean, this missing birth certificate, the delayed declaration, the unsigned document from his mother, it all creates this sense of unease, like there was something deliberately obscured about Oswald's identity.
Yeah, it's like a smokescreen. You can't help but feel like there's more to the story than we're being told.
Exactly. And you know what? This issue of the fourth decade also has a whole section of letters to the editor, responding to articles and offering new perspectives. Let's dive into those next. I have a feeling things are going to get even more interesting.
You know, these letters to the editor, they're really like a window into the JFK research community. You see all these debates, these disagreements. It's fascinating, like peeking behind the curtain.
I know, right? It's like you're eavesdropping on their conversations.
Exactly. So first up, we've got Hugh Murray. He's responding to an article about a possible encounter between Oswald and two Australian tourists back in September of '63. The article suggests Oswald might have been malnourished while he was living in Russia because he looked different in person than he did in his passport photo.
Oh, yeah, I remember that article. They were saying he looked thinner, right?
Yeah, something like that. But Murray, he's pushing back on that idea. He says, look, if Oswald was really malnourished in Minsk, wouldn't his coworkers, his friends, wouldn't they have shown signs of it too?
That's a good point. You'd think so.
And plus, Oswald had just spent several months in New Orleans before that. Not exactly a city known for food shortages, right?
Yeah, New Orleans is a foodie paradise.
Exactly. Even if Oswald hated his wife's cooking, he could have easily found tons of affordable, delicious food all over the city. No reason to be malnourished there.
So Murray's thinking Oswald's appearance could have changed due to, I don't know, just normal aging, stress, who knows, not necessarily malnutrition.
Yeah, I mean, people change over time. It's natural. It's interesting, though, how we try to read into these physical changes, make assumptions based on just a glimpse of someone.
It is. Okay, next letter. This one's from Chauncey M. Holt. Now, Holt, he's a controversial figure in JFK research. Some people swear by him, others think he's a total fabulist. But this letter, it's a direct response to an article that questioned the reliability of some of his claims.
Oh, yeah, Holt, he made some pretty wild claims, like connections to organized crime figures, even the CIA.
Yeah, exactly. And this article, it specifically questioned his alleged ties to Meyer Lansky and Santo Trafficante Jr., both major figures in the mafia.
So what does Holt say in his defense?
Well, he basically says, look, the book that the article cited, it's a good biography of Lansky, sure, but it doesn't tell the whole story. He claims a lot of Lansky's associates weren't even mentioned in that book.
Okay, so he's saying there's more to the story than what's been publicly acknowledged?
Exactly. And he claims he has copies of correspondence from Lansky, Trafficante Jr., and other major organized crime figures. Even letters from Hank Messick, a journalist who wrote extensively about organized crime, confirming these connections.
Wow. Correspondence from Lansky himself. That would be quite a find.
It would, if it's real, that is. And he also addresses the article's skepticism about his claimed CIA connections. He tells this story about how his car was searched after he was arrested for murder back in '84.
Murder? Wait, what?
Yeah, it's a whole other story. But the point is, he claims they seized several documents, including some indicating connections to the intelligence community. But then these documents were conveniently lost by the authorities.
Lost. Come on, that's too convenient.
Right. Sounds a little fishy to me, too. But it gets even weirder. Holt, he describes his trial. He says the CIA denied ever having heard of him.
Seriously? After seizing documents from his car?
Yep. But then they submitted 3 folders of records for the court's review. The judge read them, but they weren't entered into evidence, and the jury never saw them.
So what was in those folders? And why all the secrecy? It's like they're trying to hide something.
I know, right? It's so frustrating when crucial pieces of information are just withheld like that. And it makes you wonder, what else is out there that we don't know about?
Yeah, it's like the tip of the iceberg. Who knows how deep this rabbit hole goes?
And Holt, he also tackles the 3 tramps mystery in his letter. You know, those men photographed near Dealey Plaza after the assassination.
Oh yeah, the ones some people think were involved in a conspiracy. What does Holt have to say about them?
Well, he finds it suspicious that arrest records for these men suddenly appeared after years of being considered non-existent.
Convenient timing. Almost as if someone was trying to control the narrative, make sure certain information didn't come out.
That's what it looks like to me. Okay, moving on. We've got a letter from Peter R. Whitney. Now, he's focusing on Perry Russo, a key witness in Jim Garrison's investigation into the assassination.
Oh, Garrison. The New Orleans district attorney who claimed there was a conspiracy?
Yep, that's him. And Russo, he was the guy who testified about a meeting where Clay Shaw, a prominent New Orleans businessman, was allegedly plotting to kill Kennedy.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. But Russo, wasn't his credibility kind of shaky?
Well, that's what the article Whitney is responding to is saying. But Whitney, he comes to Russo's defense. He points out that even Russo's own brother, a professor of mechanical engineering, believed his story.
So someone who knew him well thought he was telling the truth.
Exactly. And Whitney, he shares his own opinion. Based on audio-taped interviews he conducted with Russo, he says Russo was genuinely concerned he might be implicated in the conspiracy and was eager to cooperate with Garrison.
So he wasn't seeking attention or trying to make up a story. He was genuinely worried.
That's how Whitney sees it. And he raises an interesting point. He says Russo's background as a well-educated Republican who actually disliked the Kennedys makes his story more believable.
Oh, that's interesting. Like, why would someone like that make up a story that could potentially harm his own political allies?
Exactly. It's like he had nothing to gain from lying.
Right. It's not like he was a Kennedy supporter who was trying to frame someone.
Exactly. Now, Whitney's not saying Russo's story is perfect or that there aren't any inconsistencies. He even acknowledges that Russo probably should have reported what he knew to the FBI right away.
Yeah, that would have been the logical thing to do.
But he questions whether anyone in Russo's position really would have done that, especially since David Ferry, another figure allegedly involved in the plot, had already been publicly cleared by the FBI.
Yeah, I can see that. If you believe there's a conspiracy and the authorities are already covering it up, why would you trust them with your information?
Exactly. It's easy to judge someone's actions from a distance, but we can't really understand the pressures and fears they were facing at the time.
Absolutely. We weren't there. We don't know what we would have done in that situation.
Right. Okay, next up we have Tom DeVries. He's responding to several letters from the previous issue, and he starts by revisiting the downtown Lincoln Mercury incident. Remember that one?
Refresh my memory.
This is where a witness claimed he saw Oswald test driving a car shortly before the assassination.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And there was a whole debate about whether this witness was reliable, whether he really saw Oswald.
Exactly. And DeVries, he actually admits he's reconsidered his stance on this. He used to be skeptical, but now he's leaning towards believing the witness did actually see Oswald.
So he's changed his mind. That's interesting. What made him do that?
He doesn't go into specifics, but it sounds like he's looked at the evidence again and come to a different conclusion.
So, case closed then.
Not so fast. He still doesn't rule out the possibility of an imposter, especially considering all the research suggesting Oswald might have been impersonated multiple times.
Oh, the imposter theory. That's a whole other rabbit hole.
It is. But it's definitely something to consider. I mean, even if this witness saw someone who looked exactly like Oswald, it doesn't necessarily mean it was actually him.
Right. It's like, okay, maybe this witness did see Oswald, but maybe it wasn't really Oswald. Makes your head spin, right?
It does. And DeVries, he also criticizes the Warren Commission and the FBI for how they handled this whole incident. He says they basically threatened the car salesman who reported it while giving more weight to the witness who claimed to have seen Oswald, even though that witness didn't come forward until almost a year after the assassination.
So they're picking and choosing which witnesses to believe based on whether their testimony fits their narrative.
It seems that way. And DeVries also challenges another letter writer's theory that Oswald might have been driving a Red Falcon station wagon that was seen near the Tippit murder scene.
Tippit, that was the police officer Oswald allegedly shot, right?
Yep. But DeVries says no, the witness testimony about the station wagon is just too unreliable, too uncorroborated.
So another dead end.
Seems like it. And then DeVries goes on to address this idea that if Oswald was truly innocent, he would have exposed the real assassins.
Yeah, that's a common argument. Like, if he was just a patsy, why didn't he speak up?
Right. But DeVries, he counters that by saying, look, even if Oswald didn't shoot Kennedy or Officer Tippit, he might still have been involved in other deceptive activities or even subjected to some kind of intelligence training that prevented him from revealing certain information.
That's an interesting point. Like, maybe he knew more than he let on, but he couldn't or wouldn't say anything.
Exactly. And it's also possible that he was afraid. I mean, if he was involved with some dangerous people, he might have feared for his own safety or the safety of his family.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's easy to say he should have spoken up, but we weren't in his shoes. We don't know what pressures he was under.
And DeVries, he also criticizes this notion that Oswald had all these opportunities to speak freely on live TV and radio while he was in custody.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that argument before. Like, he had a platform. Why didn't he use it?
But DeVries, he points to that brief midnight press conference where Oswald was quickly ushered out after shouting, "I'm just a patsy." He says that doesn't really count as a genuine opportunity to speak freely.
Yeah, I see his point. It was more like a staged event, a way for the authorities to control the narrative.
Exactly. Like a magician's trick. Create an illusion of transparency while manipulating everything behind the scenes. Okay, so in addition to all these letters, this issue of the fourth decade also has a section called Updates. New developments on previous articles. They're basically providing additional information and insights on topics they've covered before.
Oh, so new evidence, new discoveries.
Exactly. And one of these updates, it focuses on Jimmy George Robinson. Now, this name, it popped up in several contexts related to the assassination.
Jimmy George Robinson. Okay, tell me more.
Well, one Robinson, he was a member of the National States Rights Party, the NSRP, in Birmingham, Alabama.
The NSRP, that was a white supremacist group, right?
Yep. And another Robinson, also linked to the NSRP, he was under FBI investigation in Dallas.
Wait, so two Jimmy George Robinsons, both connected to a white supremacist group, and one was being investigated by the FBI in Dallas. That's a lot of coincidences.
It is, right? And it gets even weirder. The FBI initially suspected this Dallas Robinson of delivering a threatening note to the FBI office, a note that was eventually attributed to Oswald.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold on. So they thought this Robinson might have been the one to send that note, but then they pinned it on Oswald?
That's what it looks like. And newly released documents, they actually reveal that this Texas Robinson was considered a suspect on November 22nd, 1963. The day of the assassination.
So the FBI had him on their radar. What happened to him?
Well, the update says he might have already left for Birmingham by then. Basically disappeared from the Dallas scene.
Disappeared right when the FBI starts looking at him more closely. That's suspicious.
It is. And the FBI received information from multiple sources suggesting Robinson's possible involvement in the assassination. The Houston office reported that he'd purchased an 8mm rifle back in May of '63. And a police official in Richardson, Texas, he even called the Dallas FBI to suggest that Robinson and other NSRP members should be investigated.
So they're getting all these tips, all these warnings, and they're still not taking him seriously.
It's hard to say for sure, but here's the kicker. An FBI wiretap on the NSRP headquarters in Birmingham. It intercepted a call from Robinson on November 22nd, the day of the assassination. He says, "Tell Doc Fields, the NSRP director, I'm in Alabama, as he will be worried."
So he knew he was under suspicion. He knew the NSRP was under suspicion. And he skips town right when everything goes down.
It looks that way. It makes you wonder if his sudden move to Birmingham was directly related to the events in Dallas.
It does, and it raises serious questions about whether the FBI fully investigated his potential connection to the assassination. Did they just drop the ball, or was there something more to it?
It's another one of those mysteries that just keeps you guessing. And another update in this issue, it revisits a letter that George Lincoln Rockwell, the commander of the American Nazi Party, sent to J. Edgar Hoover on November 27, 1963.
The American Nazi Party, wow. What did he have to do with all this?
Well, in this letter, Rockwell, he provides Hoover with a list of 27 of his own associates, urging Hoover to keep them under surveillance.
Keep them under surveillance. Why would he do that?
The update suggests that Rockwell might have been trying to deflect suspicion from himself. Like, hey, look at these guys. They're the ones you should be worried about.
So he's throwing his own people under the bus.
It seems that way. And the update actually delves into the backgrounds of 6 of these individuals. And it turns out some of them had made some pretty disturbing statements. For example, Theodore Thiesing from Pennsylvania. He was reported to the FBI for saying, "That's good. I'm damn glad Kennedy is shot," after leaving work early on November 22nd.
Wow, not very subtle.
Not at all. And his son, he told the FBI that his father had some Nazi associates. And Thiesing himself, he'd made this cryptic statement about something surprising happening in his town within a few weeks.
So he knew something was going to happen, or at least he had a feeling.
It's possible. And then there's Owen Ryerson from Wisconsin. He actually declared in the state capitol that he wished he'd had the chance to eliminate the president himself.
Yikes. That's chilling, especially given the context.
It is. And Malcolm McGuffey from Illinois, he was listed in FBI files as a potential bombing suspect along with his business partner.
So Rockwell's list was full of people who had expressed extremist views or engaged in suspicious activities.
Yeah, it's like he was trying to preemptively clear his own name by pointing the finger at others.
Makes you wonder if he knew more than he was letting on.
It does. And then there's Dan Brown from Maryland. He received a telegram on November 22nd from an associate in Los Angeles. The telegram urged him to act now and claimed that all patriotic organizations are with us here in America.
Act now. That sounds ominous, like a call to action or a signal that something big was about to happen.
It does, doesn't it? And then we have Donald Wiley from Virginia. He was in jail on November 22nd. And he reportedly told the sheriff that the assassin was an ex-Marine who had been dishonorably discharged.
Whoa. Wait, he knew that before Oswald's identity was even released.
Apparently so. How he knew that, I have no idea. And finally, there's Richard Anderson from Virginia. He'd written a threatening letter to President Kennedy back in '61, and the Secret Service actually investigated him after the assassination.
So, another potential threat on Rockwell's list.
Yep. So like Rockwell was trying to create a distraction, draw attention away from himself by highlighting all these other potentially dangerous individuals within his organization.
Yeah, almost like he was saying, don't look at me, look at them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it makes you think, how much did Rockwell actually know about what was going on? Was he just trying to protect himself, or was there something more to it?
It's a good question. And it's another reminder that there are still so many unanswered questions surrounding the JFK assassination. We may never know the full truth.
And these updates, they highlight how the search for answers continued decades later. New information was still emerging, challenging the established narratives, raising new questions. It's clear that the case was far from settled, even in 1997.
Yeah, and it probably never will be. But that's what makes it so fascinating, right? The mystery, the intrigue, the endless possibilities.
Absolutely. This issue of the fourth decade, it's taken us on quite a journey, from passionate calls to action to intricate investigations into potential connections and conspiracies. We've seen how researchers grapple with conflicting evidence, challenge established narratives, and try to make sense of this pivotal moment in American history.
And it shows us that history is never truly settled. It's an ongoing conversation, a process of constantly reevaluating the past based on new information and perspectives.
So, what does it all mean? What are the key takeaways from this deep dive into a 1997 issue of the fourth decade? Man, my head is spinning. So much information, so many different viewpoints, it's overwhelming.
I know, right? This issue of the fourth decade, it really throws you into the deep end of JFK research. No life vest, just jump right in.
Yeah, no kidding. We've seen the passion, the intensity of researchers like Charles Drago, who genuinely believe that uncovering the truth could, shake the foundations of America.
Yeah.
And then we've explored all these murky connections, these potential conspiracies, from Oswald's alleged ties to left-wing groups, to Chauncey Holt's claims about organized crime and the CIA. It's wild.
It's a tangled web, for sure.
And some of these stories, they sound like they're straight out of a spy movie. Missing documents, FBI wiretaps, a Nazi leader trying to shift the blame. It's crazy.
It really is. I think it just shows us how messy history really is. It's rarely neat and tidy. There are always contradictions, multiple interpretations, missing pieces.
Absolutely. And when you're talking about an event as impactful, as traumatic as the JFK assassination, that search for truth, it can become an obsession, a lifelong pursuit for some people.
Yeah, it's almost like a puzzle you can never fully solve. There are always more pieces to find, more questions to ask.
And this journal, it's a testament to that. It shows that even decades later, there were still people passionately dedicated to uncovering the truth, no matter how difficult or controversial it might be.
It's inspiring in a way, that dedication to finding the truth no matter what.
I agree. What really struck me, though, was just the sheer volume of information out there and the different ways people interpret it. We've got eyewitness accounts that contradict each other, official reports that seem incomplete or maybe even intentionally misleading, and then this whole network of individuals, each with their own agendas, their own motivations. It's a lot to untangle.
It's like a giant jigsaw puzzle, but some of the pieces are missing, some are damaged, and some might not even belong to the same puzzle in the first place.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And as we've seen, even seemingly insignificant details, like Oswald's birth certificate or a car salesman's testimony, they can become huge points of contention, fuel for endless speculation.
It's amazing how these small details can take on such significance.
So, after all this, after this deep dive, what do you think? What stands out to you as the most important takeaway? What's the big picture here?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is just realizing that history, it's not a closed book. It's more like an ongoing conversation, a process of constantly reevaluating the past as we uncover new information, new perspectives.
Like a story that's still being written.
Exactly. And in the case of the JFK assassination, that conversation is definitely still going strong. New documents are still being released, new witnesses are coming forward, new theories are being proposed all the time.
It's a case that never seems to die, does it?
It doesn't. And this issue of the fourth decade, it shows us that the search for answers wasn't over, even back in 1997. Makes me wonder, what else is out there? What haven't we discovered yet?
It's exciting to think about, isn't it? Like there are still mysteries waiting to be solved, truths waiting to be revealed.
I think that's a great takeaway from all of this. That we should never stop questioning, never stop digging deeper, never take anything at face value, especially when it comes to events that have shaped our world so profoundly.
Couldn't agree more. This deep dive, it hasn't given us all the answers, but I think it's given us something even more valuable. A sense of curiosity, a thirst for knowledge, and a deeper appreciation for the complexities of history.
Yeah, it's less about finding definitive answers and more about asking the right questions.
And who knows, maybe someone listening to this right now, maybe they'll be the one to uncover the next piece of the puzzle, to shed new light on this mystery that's captivated generations.
That would be amazing.
It would. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of JFK assassination research. We hope it sparked your own curiosity, inspired you to keep exploring the hidden depths of history.
Always keep an open mind, right?
Always. Until next time, keep questioning, keep searching, and keep diving deep.